Hello and welcome back to the second issue of Technopolists. I am Ken Chan.
And I am Movies McConnell, otherwise known as MC2P4.
And we're back with more. Some prelims here. Movies I picked up, I got this from eBay, Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, and I started reading it. I'm about 5 chapters in, and I'm finding not only is it very interesting in the cyberpunk realm, but it's also got a very hardcore element of comedy to it that's just rip-roaring funny. I don't want to give any spoilers to anybody who hasn't read it yet, but I'm finding it quite hilarious. Some of the stuff that's, the 4 things that America does great still, in the future, and
As the deliberator.
The deliberator,
Yeah, not to give anything away.
Right, yeah.
And some of the predictions for a book that was written in 1992, and it's important to read the prelude in that book, some of the information, like after you read it, that it was written in like the early 90s, and some of the things came true, some didn't. Some are actually happening, the precursors to what happened in that book, and some of the craziness is happening right at this very moment, some of the philosophical types of things, without, again, giving it away. And it's funny that you bring that up and did that, because it really kind of leads into your first topic for tonight. And I'm going to let you take the first topic, but I mean, because of personal situations right now, I've been under a lot of stress and didn't have a lot of time to look at things. So I spent some time just before we got on here tonight. And I got to tell you, some of this is ticking over pretty good right now. So I'm going to let you go ahead and take over what the first topic is, and then we can get into that.
Okay, so I'm going to put in the description, I'm going to put the URL to this article it is from the Guardian. And it's from, it's October 2018. So it's an older article. But it still is interesting that they take this that they're taking this approach to this. It's the article's called "Neon and Corporate Dystopias: Why Does Cyberpunk Refuse to Move On?" And he goes on to basically give all the tropes, the cliches, the cyberpunk, the cities with the rain and the neon and the Blade Runner background, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it kind of like pokes fun at that. I would like our viewers to read the article itself, but it goes on to basically say towards the end here, it's something that cyberpunk must evolve or die, so my whole take on that is the idea is ridiculous. And I've read other articles similar to that, where they've talked about how we have solar punk now, which is, instead of a bleak future, it's a green future. You have futuristic buildings. Everything solar punk is futuristic buildings with trees everywhere around them. And there's lunar punk, which is still just defining itself. But the idea that cyberpunk has to change or move on, to me, that's like saying that heavy metal has to get rid of the hardcore riffs, or the goth culture has to get rid of the black nail polish and the black lipstick, or something like that. These things, cyberpunk is a thing that stands on its own. It's a culture, and it stands on its own, and it does its own thing. And I think it's ridiculous to suggest that something like that needs to change somehow.
Well, the one thing that I would jump in there with is, number one, nothing is new, right? So you take a kid to the store now and you say, here's a toy for you, and you go Shaker Maker, or Magic Window, or Zigzag Zoom, or Kerplunket. Every game that was there that's not electronic, and even some of the electronic gaming, video gaming system versions are the same as what came before, right? So you're like, I played with this as a kid. They just redid it, made it cheaper. It's made out of plastic now instead of metal, but it's the same thing that it was when we were a kid, right?
Right.
So when people talk about this, what you're calling solar punk and all that, that's ecotopia. That goes back to a book that I bought at East Meets West in 1978 that talks about how California becomes ecotopia, and those states break off and make their maglev trains, and how there's arguments. And if you then read The Diamond Age, which is the second, or not the second book, but another book by Neil Stephenson who wrote Snow Crash, they talk about how the culture becomes such that everyone is included. Okay, so in that included, you can go to an Axion feed or a molecular. I think in that book it's a molecular feed. So it's a molecular generator, and you can go to that molecular generator with your card, like your multipass from like what's the Bruce Willis movie, The Fifth Element, right?
Oh, okay, yeah.
And you can say, okay, even as just a citizen, I can get some rice and a toothbrush made by the molecular feed. Now, if I have more money, I can get more stuff, right, made by the molecular feed. But on the other side of it, it's this whole culture of people who like carve things out of wood. So like to me, it speaks to me because like my acrylic artwork and stuff like that, like I can make prints of it and I can do something tangible from it. But in that respect, the one side of the culture values all the things that are, handmade and traditional, and the other side of the culture values, well, I mean, we can get you a turkey. We'll just program in a turkey, just like Star Trek, and like have it make, chicken soup or whatever. So it's kind of funny that when they try, see, this is the same problem that happened with the music industry. Okay, like you just said. Okay, I got this great new band. Well, what does it sound like?
Right, yeah.
Right, F it. Because I'm going to tell you something that says we're hard tech robocore, or we're hypermedia industrial death. But at that point, they don't want to hear that. They want to hear, is it rock? Is it freak? Is it rap? Is it country? Is it jazz? Is it new age? And if it so the problem here, in my opinion, always becomes it has to be defined just enough by some set of somebody's current standards. So by that very right there, you hit the nail right on the head earlier. Why does something called cyberpunk have to evolve? I would say it only has to evolve for one reason and one reason only, and it's a two-part reason. And one is things get outdated, right? So when you watch Escape from New York, right, the Twin Towers are gone now. You got to suspend disbelief and go, it's just a funny movie. It's just a wild movie, right?
Right.
And the other part of this is that the time frame has to change a bit and the culture has to change a little bit. But the time frame, right? Like the historical, you can't say it's 1999 now, right? You got to say it's 2020. Like in my books that I wrote, I said it's 2025 or 2026 or whatever, and that's going to run out after a period of time, and you have to fix that. But other than that, I don't think the problem is people have their agendas. So they want to put, like you said before, and in that article that you sent me, it talks about how there's these psychosexual overtones of these certain books. Same thing as Isaac Asimov back in like the late 70s, mid-70s, right?
So, yeah, those are some good tidbits to chew on there, really. I think if they're talking about evolution or die, I don't know if it's an or die thing, but there has been a lot of evolution. I mean, even in the 90s, not everything that's cyberpunk has a dystopian future. The movie Hackers is definitely cyberpunk. That's not set in the future.
But it's not dystopian necessarily.
Yeah, and there's no dystopia. It's not set in the future, and there's no dystopia. It's about a bunch of hip kids that are hackers, but it's a cyberpunk movie for sure.
Right.
And there's one on Netflix right now called Altered Carbon that I just started watching, where you have cyberpunk there, but you also have when you go to where the rich people are in that, you have solar punk in there too, because the rich people all live in these nice places with a bunch of trees around.
Sure.
Yeah. So there's that too, and the latest Blade Runner movie, you can see that's still kind of the same as the first one. It has a lot of the same themes and stuff like that. But that, okay, so we live past 2019 when the first Blade Runner came out, and no, we don't have neon umbrellas. No, we don't make video calls at a payphone. We carry around cell phones. So okay, it's an alternate universe then.
But right there, I have to interrupt you. Right there, two things. Number one is you hit the second thing I'm going to say here. Let me say the first thing first. The first thing is we don't have neon umbrellas because we didn't decide that we needed neon umbrellas. However, my dog goes outside on a neon pink blinking collar chain that looks just as cyberpunk or just as crazy, wild, modern technology than anything that you'll see there, right? Okay. Yeah. Now, the other thing is what you just hit on is exactly what I speak of. Now, the suspension of disbelief is an important factor in watching any kind of horror or sci-fi movie. Why do I say this? I say this because how can Jodie Foster be in a panic room and not have a cell phone that works to get out of there or any working phone? So you have, so Precinct 13, right? So Assault on Precinct 13. In the old one, nobody had cell phones. Kim Richards, she's 6 years old. It's 1974. Okay, now in the new one, right, they all have cell phones. Well, how come they can't not call? There's got to be a storm or something happening, right? But same thing here. You just said it. We don't go to the Haywood Floyd using the Bell Atlantic system on the space station to call back to Earth in 2001. We all have cell phones. So that is specifically where the movie needs to be socially and technologically updated, i.e. Fahrenheit 451, which they did, and it sucked. Why? Because Francois Truffaut, if he's still alive, God only knows, I have to look it up, but if he was, he should have been consulted to do the movie. But they did it poorly. But so many times you'll hear us say it and other people will say it. That movie didn't effing need to be redone, did it, Ken Chen? It didn't.
No.
But there are many times, like in the case of Fahrenheit 451, because the concepts were so good, but the movie was so far out of date that somebody new trying to watch it would be put off by it. Right? Like versions of Solaris, all these kind of things. So I definitely get it. Like, look at the screens, the laser behind me, the screens behind you. This is something that even, 15, us, yeah, sure, we would have things looking like this, just like me at my house and you at your house 15, 20, 25 years ago. But most people didn't. So now, I can do, just like in Fahrenheit 451, if you don't know this, you should. The walls, the way that people, judge and value each other technologically in Fahrenheit 451 is how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, how many walls of your room have television on the wall. And I currently have that in the media room next door. I can do all 4 walls. So I can have Jesus come up and sell me soap on all 4 walls and we're good. So, having spoken about that though, like, what are your thoughts from the standpoint of, like, do you look at a pure movie, like, say, an original version, and then look at a new version? Like, if they okay, here's one for you. They redo Hackers. And that's one of your favorite movies.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't see how they would be able to do that. But by the same token, I reject the whole kind of Puritanism. Puritanism is one of the things that keeps things from happening a lot of times, and it's the kind of thing like a lot of people, the Ghost in the Shell movie, the live action with what's her name,
Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, Scarlett Johansson.
I have not.
A lot of people bagged on that movie because she's not Asian, and that kind of Puritanism is, well, how do you know that Motoko in the anime is actually Asian? She's in a prosthetic body. In that series and that movie and the original anime and all that, she is a brain in a case that's then lowered into a prosthetic body. Okay? At the very end of the original movie, the original anime movie, at the end of it, they put that brain case, they take it out of her old body that got annihilated, basically, and they put it in a prosthetic body of a little girl. So now she's a little girl. Well, and with Ghost in the Shell, everything, all those different stories, they're all in parallel universes, and this is explained. So why couldn't that also be a parallel universe? Puritanism is one of those things that ruins things. people that are fans of Shazam. Well, he used to be Captain Marvel, and now he's Shazam, and we're going to make this big to-do about that.
Okay, well, the one thing that I would interrupt you there with, and I'm glad that you went on that tear, because I want to also talk with you about this and explain my take on it. I fully agree with that. I also think, number one, I'm kind of an idiot because I write stories and I write this long novel, and I think I've come up with something so novel in concept, and then you tell me Ghost in the Shell, and I go, well, oh crap, like some of what I wrote like could be very much interpreted that way, and many other things, because again, nothing is new, right? But on top of that, they're brilliant in that standpoint of it's always just an alternate universe, so it's an easy way to explain it. But even on top of that, what I would say, and Ken-chan and all viewers of this channel, I am certainly not a stereotyper or a racist of any type. But what I will say is this: if I write the story, I don't want some represented group for some reason to come and tell me what I have to have in my story. The person being the protagonist in the story, in almost every sci-fi story, there is absolutely no hint of racial anything. So then to place somebody in there because they are black, or because they are Chinese, or because they are Indian, American Indian, I don't care. That has nothing to do with the story. Now, conversely, the fact that apparently the character of Dr. Chandra in 2010 was an Indian, and at the time that didn't read well with American and European audiences, so they made that character John Lithgow. That, in my opinion, and to use a word like offensive is just pretty over the top, but I would say, you know, like the Jerry Seinfeld joke of, well, that offends you as a Jewish person? No, it offends me as a comedian. Well, it'd be the same thing. If that offends you as a white person? No, it offends me as a writer. Because you don't have to take someone and say, well, Ford Prefect from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy needs to be a black guy. Why? He could have been an Indian guy. He could have been a white guy. I always envisioned him as a white guy. But is that me thinking that's just kind of what I envisioned? No, that was me because I watched the really bad English television show that had a white guy playing it. But you see, that's kind of, I think what I'm speaking to here, more so than trying to make any kind of racial statement, is just we're kind of, you know, like, would you think that Japanese people would see that? They're kind of like, well, Ghost in the Shell, that's like kind of our, you know, our cultural thing. So there's
and the whole thing in that movie, though, she discovers that she was an Asian girl. She was a Japanese girl,
right,
and her name is Motoko. And she discovers that. Just, you know, it doesn't mean
I have that Laserdisc. I have that over there, like the early ones. I have like the apparently.
Well, I'm talking about the new one. I'm talking about the one with Scarlett Johansson.
Sure, and I mean, you know, who doesn't want to look at Scarlett Johansson anyway?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, you're not. She's not unpretty.
No.
So you bought that Neil Stephenson book.
Yes.
But another one that I would recommend is that The Diamond Edge. You should read that too. But speaking of that, we had talked before about William Gibson, and had talked about how
Mr. Dictionary.
our opinions of some of his loquaciousness and some of his terms. But, you know, I do like the concepts. They are quite good.
Yeah.
One of which is a book that he wrote called Idoru. And in Idoru, long story short, the two main characters are musicians, much like Vitaly Chernobyl and Chi, or not Chi, I forget the guy's hero in the Neil Stephenson book, in Snow Crash. But in Idoru, the two main characters are musicians, and they have all these videos out, and they're always making new songs. Well, it turns out at the end of the story, somebody meets them, and like one of their eyes is gouged out, one of them's missing an arm, the other one's ears falling off. They're like, well, you look so youthful in their videos, and they're like, well, we've had an audio catalog that goes back 55 years. Like, what do you think we're showing you? And it turns out that they're showing the videos they had shot 40 years ago, so they look nice and young, and they would use artificial intelligence to make these bodies look good, and they could do all these effects with the computers. And it kind of got me thinking. I saw something the other day where somebody said the historical referent on YouTube is such that it's become what somebody used to describe, and I have an article about this, the celestial jukebox. And the celestial jukebox is just every song, every video, every clip, every piece of media you've ever looked for. Well, there it is, and it resides there. And of course, it's got metadata that says when it was created or when it was done. But does anybody really pay attention to that? So now you kind of see these kids walking around. Ian Curtis from Joy Division was so pissed off for years that their T-shirts sold better than their records did, right?
Uh-huh.
And then he died. Then you got these kids that are, you and I are in our 50s, right?
Right.
And now you got kids walking around wearing Pink Floyd T-shirts. Pink Floyd's still a band, as far as I understand. But they're wearing Led Zeppelin T-shirts. And it's like, Led Zeppelin hasn't made a record in 40 years.
Yeah.
So at that point, we really can point. I mean, nothing wrong with Led Zeppelin. I love Led Zeppelin. But these kids that are seeing this, there's been an entire generation that's grown up before they even grew up that had Led Zeppelin as like the gods of their music. And then they're all going back to it and saying, well, this is the greatest thing. Did you ever hear of this? And it's like, yeah, I've heard of Donny Osmond and the Osmonds doing, Crazy Horses. And they're like, wow, well, I just found it. Well, of course you did, because now you've got this entire library of stuff that was never there before.
Right.
Think about me and you. Like, I listen to progressive and new wave and crazy crap, and you listen to, like, hardcore metal and stuff. But
right.
yet, we did, unless we lent or borrowed stuff from each other, we didn't know about. So we'd be like, hey, check out this band.
And it certainly used to be that the way I remember it is like people were into the music from their era. There really wasn't any of this. I like music from the from 40 years ago. That didn't used to really happen. I mean, when we were in high school and stuff like that, we didn't listen to music from 40 years ago. I didn't know anybody that did that.
Well, and the point being that the music has. I'm not saying that there's some giant magnanimous thing. However, the music that we listened to at that time 40 years ago has progressed. Some of it badly, some of it differently. But yes. Remember, 40 years before we were listening to music, it was big bands and stuff. And people do listen to that. But that also speaks back to that, I listen to everything. And like we said the other week.
You're right, yeah. You don't listen to everything. Yeah. Nobody listens to everything. Right, yeah.
But nowadays you have more opportunity for that. Like you could be like somebody says, oh, that was a Glenn Campbell song. They played a Glenn Campbell song during the Five or something, and you're like, well, wait a minute, let me see really who Glenn Campbell was. And that's the beauty. That's what we were promised in the 80s, is someday you'll know that was Donnie Iris. Someday you'll know that was the Knack, So
right.
It's weird how. And I think that's what you're talking about. Is it's weird how somebody now can really follow up on that. They can go back and go, oh, who's this band My Sex from Austria or Australia or wherever they were from, and Men at Work. Like who listens to Men at Work now? I do.
Right.
You might, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, you also have at the time. You had these videos that were obscure, that you maybe saw once, that you or I might go back and then we go and we watch it again and we're like, oh, remember this? But
yeah.
But it's also available to everybody. So you have these people that never saw it before, I have no idea what they're looking at, and they're going, oh, this is pretty cool. Yeah. So there's that too, and that's the kind of thing that talks about what you kind of advances what you're talking about there with the what'd you call it, the celestial jukebox. Sure. It's something that anybody can get now. What's old is new, again, of course. I don't think because there really is no music industry anymore to speak of. Everything's become, what it is. MTV isn't really music television anymore. It's just it's just weird entertainment things that they show, and they don't really show music videos. And for good reason. If you want music videos, you can go on YouTube and find music videos.
Right. So what's happening is I think what you're leading to here is that the industry has changed. Certainly has changed.
Oh,
The
yeah.
financial means and the financial motivations, as well as the media, has changed. So when you go back into the cliches of the industry, right? You have all the cliches of the world, right? My mother-in-law, I'll say a bunch of things, and I'll say 17 sentences, and she'll say, "What you mean is," and she'll give me a cliche, right? So one of the cliches in the music industry is, or in the industry of entertainment, should I say, is the media is the message. So in saying that, what we really need to look at is how the differing revenue streams have caused new paradigms. So where something fails, and this was the big, in my opinion, problem with how America handled the internet. The Germans actually sat down and said, if you look forward, just as somebody reading a book about dial-up modems and single computers read a book that said there will now be servers and clusters and then cloud computing as a history of the future, the Germans sat down and said, okay, essentially, if what's going to happen is Amazon or whoever is going to take over for all these companies like Borders, Books, and Music and all these things that were your brick and mortar stores, we have to protect those people's jobs. So what they did was they actually did levy a tax that everybody in America screamed about from all the way back to the Boston Tea Party, taxation without representation. But what the Germans actually did was they alleviated a lot of that problem that was going to occur because those brick and mortar middlemen were going to be put out of business by direct distribution sales from warehouses, whether it be furniture, media products, pharmaceutical drugs, whatever. Those people were going to be put out of business. So either they had to become programmers, part of the supply chain, or the end advertisers. So to that means now that the entire industry, because like I said before, I do acrylic art, I do writing, and I do music. So here's where it's coming to, is this whole NFT thing, which is this non-fungible transaction. And I'm sad to say that my preparation has not prepared me properly to understand what fungible really means and the whole situation. I pulled down some information, I looked at that. But what it really speaks to me, and I think maybe you've done some research on this, or maybe we can together here on the air, but it seems to me that as an artist, I need to, if I do a 600 DPI picture of my artwork and put it online, I have to write sample over it. Why? Because somebody will just take it. Same thing.
Right, yeah.
Same thing with my music, right? So at this point, we are still Luddites, and we put out CDs, and we sell these things, right? These CDs that nobody buys. Now, you can apparently, in this non-fungible transaction, it seems to me to be vaporware, but I try to look at it in a positive way, or vapor pay, I would call it vapor money, right? But this speaks to blockchain technologies and all of this, and from the standpoint of protecting the artist or the artist's interest in getting paid for what people think is popular seems to be the way to go. Now, with having said that, I would say that it would be a way to protect my acrylic or digital assets of either music or paintings or whatever. Like, how would you define that, or do you understand anything about that? Because this seems to be the wave of the future.
Well,
cash is king, but of course at the same time, PayPal is wonderful, and I'll get paid any way I can.
What I'm looking at here, non-fungible. Okay, so it says here, just definition of non-fungible token. A non-fungible token is a unit of data on a digital ledger called a blockchain, where each NFT can represent a unique digital item, and thus they are not interchangeable. NFTs can represent digital files such as art, audio, videos, items in video games, and other forms of creative work. Now, of course, to understand that, we should really
so it
kind of
explain
technology how blockchain works. And blockchain works very similar to the way a checksum works. You have a alphanumeric checksum, basically. Yeah, they can be 128-bit, 256-bit, 512-bit, whatever. The longer, the better. And what you do is, okay, so I do this whenever I download a Linux distro. I compare, especially if it's something like Tails, I have the computer run a checksum on the thing, and then I compare the alphanumeric straight, it's like a really long, like XMPLG 157832, like that, and I compare those two numbers together, and if it's been changed, that means somebody was messing with it.
Sure.
Okay, in the blockchain, if somebody messes with a file, then that number changes,
sure,
and there's no way that you can't put it back the way it was. You can't change it and put it back and have that same number.
Right. And one thing that I can give you my understanding of ISBN as well as checksum numbers, like MD5, right? So ISBN is such that I've known some geeks in my life that have actually taken a book and they said, I've never seen this book, have I? And I said, not that I know of. And they said, now flip it over, a published book. And they're like, please cover up the last right-hand number. And then they will look at the ISBN number, which is like 171-41-16G, whatever. And it goes down to a last number. And they'll look at me after a short calculation and go, that number under your thumb is the number 9. And I'll lift my thumb up and go, SOB, how in the world did they know that was number 9? Because first of all, they're geeks. And second of all, they're tack heads. And third of all, they can't do it with an MD5 checksum. They can't calculate that in their head unless they're Rain Man. However, those checksums are used when I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. They're used to send submissions down through the electronic submissions gateway. It's precisely why you said, because they send it down and the TCP/IP handshake says, did you receive? It says, I sent you this, and then it says, yes, I received that exact thing. And just like you said, a validator will throw up a problem and go, it was 15G 71 827 XYZ 0000001. And it'll go, no, it was 0000000, and it'll fail. So that's what you're saying is there's like an MD5 checksum behind the blockchain that's protecting everything. Now let's take a layer out in the onion. Why is this useful? And I'm thinking to myself that it protects your assets because you're listed as the owner of the asset. But on top of that, it's a tracker because as long as you know what checksum numbers or what index has been assigned to those checksum numbers. So say I'm John Q. Smith, and John Q. Smith has an index number that has a set of ascension numbers that lock to a set of MD5 checksums. So that means he's got, like me, 110 pieces of art that have checksum numbers associated, 400 songs and checksum. So not only does it check and make sure that when it arrives properly, so somebody didn't paint some kind of pee-pee or wee-wee on it or, like draw some kind of something on it, right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Stupid, right?
They didn't change it somehow.
And that's the old joke from Seinfeld, his first library book. But the other part is it also could be used to track and to keep an accounting. Would you not agree?
Yeah, I mean,
for monetary purposes.
Yeah, you definitely want to. It's just another way to protect what's yours. There's so much today with intellectual property being just like yoinked and everybody just helping themselves to stuff.
Well, yeah. It's a Wild West show. It's a Wild West show. You steal whatever you want.
Yeah, anything that they can come up with to protect stuff is golden, and if that's how that works, and if it's this NFTs can represent digital files such as art, audio, videos, especially like things like audio, protecting audio and video, that's really hard to do.
Well,
because there's so many ways.
Well, it's funny too because I don't know if to interrupt you there, but it's funny too because I called up my friend Lip, who you and I have worked for before, doing audio and stuff and doing shows, and one of the things we would ask him from time to time, I know you did too. You're like, well, when you work with these cover bands and they start playing these songs, does anybody care? And he's like, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder in this Wild West show now, is there somebody? A space alien, an HL7 health level resource officer. Who is it that's sitting there currently at where these NFTs are traded and going, no, Sam Smith, for $10 you can't register, Allen Iverson doing a triple dunk or what, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
What's the mechanism to make sure? Like, do you have to show publishing, or is it just first in, first out?
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah. Really, I mean,
I
wonder how they go about that. Really, I mean,
I am MC2P4. Are you? Would the real MC2P4 please stand up? Well, since it's an alias, and I have laid claim to that, but does that mean that Ken Chan could stand up and say, I am MC2P4, right?
Right.
So, who's to say? It's a little tricky, But it seems to be, again, back around to this. Here you go. So my wife's in the hospital the other day. I'm starving. I don't eat fast food anymore, and I went through Wendy's to get a biggie bag. I had cash. Guess what? We're sorry. Only cash today. So again, we're back to, I can use my credit card. I can swipe. Hell, if I could pay for fast food with my PayPal account, man, I'd be golden. But at the end of the day, we had a place downtown that said, what was it? No cash. It was an ice cream store for kids. No cash. Really?
Wow.
How much business do you think you're gonna do? So that's my question here. So again, it's back to always protect the intellectual property. That's great. And a way to get paid, hey, if I can convert it, just like when somebody pays me on PayPal and I can say, put this money in the bank, golden, perfectly golden. Do I need William Devane's? Buy gold. I don't even like the sound of gold. I don't like to feel it. No, I don't really care about that because he's talking about an individual retirement account with gold at a place where I'm never going to see the gold. So what's the point?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and if gold's so valuable, why are you trying so desperately to get me to buy it? Why don't you buy it? If it's a big secret, if there's some big financial secret going on here, why don't you try to hog it all up so you get it all? So if you're trying to share it, you want to share it with me. So yeah, the NFT thing, it would take me a while to get my head around how that kind of thing works. I'm gonna have to look into it a lot more. But when you pointed this out to me today, I was like, "What is that?" And you were talking about how it's kind of similar to cryptocurrency and stuff like that. And I'm like, "Oh, blockchain." Okay.
But it seems to me the blockchain is a means to an end. But it seems like the end game here might be a little different. But we'll have to see how it expands and how it unfolds. But it just seems to be that the key here again is always the encryption of the transaction to keep prying and doodling hands off. And in case none of you know this, Ken Chan in a former life has had a run-in with postal authorities having opinions about any kind of material that he was consuming. And so people get their grubby little hands on these things and think that they can pop open the lid on something and start reading it and then offering up their opinions. So I know that this kind of situation, this kind of protection is something that everybody should be afforded, whether it's monetary, whether it is philosophically, whether it's what your reading material is or what your desires are to read or consume anything. It is truly no one else's business. And I think that this kind of blockchain and kind of technologies can really go a long way to doing something good in the world where we see so many things that we think can be used incorrectly. But as we all know, everything is just a tool and it's the way it's used.
Right. Exactly.
Having said that,
well said.
I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that everybody here along with us enjoyed it too.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that like button. And leave your comments below. And be sure to check us out next time. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you later on.
Later.